everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Nintendo Switch 2 and compare it against the Nintendo Switch Lite and see which particular console is a better one for you. Now, the thing I will definitely tell you when it comes down to both these particular consoles is that they're very different, right? They're definitely not like the perfect type of console when it comes down to it. But the Nintendo Switch 2, if you have all the money in the world, it makes so much sense to go ahead and buy that console over the Nintendo Switch Lite. The Switch 2 is going to be giving you way better power, way better capability, and that's just going to be the nicer type of console when it comes down to it. With the Nintendo Switch Lite, I feel like this particular console, it's a good effort by Nintendo, and it's good if you are on like an extreme budget. But other than that, I don't really see why you'd ever want to go ahead and pick up a Switch Lite over the Switch 2. And if the fundamentals are still the same with the Nintendo Switch Lite 2, like the successor of the Switch Lite, I honestly think it would still make a lot more sense to buy a Nintendo Switch 2 or a used Nintendo Switch OLED. So we'll take a look at this throughout this whole entire video. But if at any point you want to go ahead and buy the Nintendo Switch 2 or any of the other Nintendo Switches, links will be down in the description below. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of both these particular consoles, the first thing you're going to have to remember, this is very important, with the Nintendo Switch Lite, this console came out back in 2019. So this is not the latest and greatest Nintendo console anymore. This is already 6 years old. But the other very big thing you're going to have to remember is that this was a very cheap console for the Nintendo Switch's, life cycle. This was not supposed to be like a, very professional console. This was supposed to be a cheap entry-level option for the Nintendo Switch series. When this thing first came out, it was $200, which was about $100 cheaper than the original Switch. And it was even more cheaper than compared to the OLED Switch. So with this one, about $200 inside of it, not a terrible price for an entry-level Nintendo Switch. You were basically getting on the front side a 5.5-inch LCD panel on the front, which was a good type of display. It's definitely not terrible, but it was very small, and the panel itself was it was not that good of a panel. So I didn't really like this thing that much. I would never really play with it too much. I made lots of videos on it on my second channel and my third channel, but I never really used it. It wasn't really the console I would look at as basically, trying to use it too much. But I did like it a little bit because it was smaller than the original Switch, right? The original Switch seemed a little bit bigger and bulkier. I liked the Switch Lite because it was just not necessarily it was just more portable. And I liked that type of layout with the Nintendo Switch, to be honest. The problem though I had with the Switch Lite was, number one, the Joy-Cons could not be removed. I didn't really like that. Right, the big reason for this was because of the amount of issues that the Joy-Cons and the drifting situation had. So I liked my original Switch and the OLED one and the Switch 2 because you can remove them and replace them if you need to. This one, there's just not a way to, use the integrated type of Joy-Cons. They're just non-detachable. So that's the problem with the Switch Lite. The Switch 2 it doesn't really fix anything because the original Switch already had these features, but this one is a much different type of console. This one is a $450 Nintendo Switch. So this one is over twice the price of the Switch Lite when it debuted, and this thing is going to be giving you a 7.9-inch LCD panel. So this is like the most premium type of pro type of console you can buy from Nintendo right now. The display itself is beautiful. It's a very good panel. It's very bright. It's 1080p, and it's also going to be giving you basically a 120Hz display there as well. So that right there is going to be another really big advantage, right? Being able to go ahead and play those games, it's HDR10, it's going to be a beautiful type of panel. And when you're looking at the Nintendo Switch 2 compared to the Switch Lite, there are some pretty big key differences from that particular panel itself. Now, I would normally say with a Switch video that, if you're docking your console all the time somewhere and you're just using it like that, then, it doesn't really matter what the display looks like because you're using it on your TV. The Switch Lite does not have the capability of docking up to a display. You have a USB Type-C port on it, but it just doesn't fit in the dock, and you cannot go through and actually dock it up to any display. It does not have display out. So, unfortunately with that, you are stuck using that 5.5-inch display, and like I said, it's not terrible, but it's really not that great either. And I do feel like it's kind of a con when it kind of comes down to it. With the Switch 2, another thing to keep in mind here too is the design of it is much different. You have those Joy-Cons that magnetically clasp out. So that right there I think is a very nice thing to basically have there. If you're going to go through and pick up a device from that side, I do think that is kind of a nice thing to have from that particular perspective. Now I do think from that particular side too, when it kind of comes down to it, you're also going to basically be getting a better build quality on the Nintendo Switch 2. You have the kickstand on the back that basically kicks out. You also have that micro SD card slot on both and game card slots on both, but this is a little bit of a difference here too. With the Nintendo Switch 2, this console is basically going through and giving you that, micro SD card express port, where the standard Nintendo Switch Lite gives you standard micro SD card. Now, this is kind of the little difference here, because with the Nintendo Switch 2, you have to pay for kind of a more expensive micro SD card. The standard one is not going to give you all the features. You're not going to be able to put in Nintendo Switch 2 games. There are benefits of micro SD card express because it is a faster type of expandable storage, and I'm very happy that we still have expandable storage inside of this console, but that is kind of an annoying thing a little bit depending on which way you're kind of looking at it. But you are getting 4 times the amount of base internal storage compared to the Nintendo Switch Lite. The Switch Lite was giving you 32 gigabytes of storage. The Switch 2 is now giving you 256 gigabytes of storage built in. So that's actually a pretty good upgrade in and of itself, and that will make it much easier to go ahead and buy a bunch of games and just store them inside of your console. So I do think from that side as well, that's another really big advantage for this type of console as well, because you might not even need to buy a micro SD card for a while, and I feel like that type of storage is enough for the most part as of this point, and you'll be able to use it that way, which I think is actually really cool. Now, I would probably also add, for the most part, when you're looking at it from a battery life perspective, the Switch Lite is said to be giving you 3 to 7 hours of video or battery life, inside of it, where the Switch 2 is giving you 2 to 6.5 hours. So because it's a much more powerful console, it's just going to be giving you a little bit of a more limited type of experience when it comes down to that side. On top of that, when it comes down to the power inside of these consoles, the Switch Lite is giving you an older type of NVIDIA Tegra chipset. The Switch 2 is giving you a way better NVIDIA chipset inside of it. It's also giving you way more RAM, and that console is just going to be a way more powerful console in every single way you can imagine. So if I'm sitting here, right, and I'm looking at a particular console, I'm looking at the Nintendo Switch 2, and I'm like, wow, that is a very fast, powerful console, and any games you're going to throw at it, anything you're going to play with it, the loading times, the gaming experience in general is going to be very fast. When the Switch 1 came out, the internals were already a little bit old, and I'm surprised Nintendo was able to kind of push through those graphics like the way they were able to and give us very amazing looking games for as long as they did. With the Switch 2, this one's a little bit different, because this one is pretty powerful. I heard it's about the same as like in PlayStation 4 or Xbox One, which is actually pretty good because you never really need to have like the most powerful console from the Nintendo side to get really good games. Look at the Nintendo Switch 1, look at the Wii. Even the Wii U for the most part was very powerful, but the Switch was about as powerful as a Wii U a little bit. So this one is going to be very powerful, and I'm very excited to see the games that we're going to be getting from this console when it comes down to it. So, in my personal opinion, what I'll definitely tell you is that when it comes down to these two, going from a Switch Lite to a Switch 2 is a big upgrade. I would recommend it. If you have the money, I'd recommend doing it. If you are in the middle and you don't really have a Switch Lite and you don't have a Switch 2, I would recommend buying a Switch OLED, the Nintendo Switch OLED model that came out like 2 or 3 years ago. That one, or 4 years ago now, wow. That one I think would be a better type of console to go and buy rather than a Switch Lite. If you can buy it in the used market, I'd recommend doing that. They're probably going to go down in value a little bit because of the price of the Switch 2s coming out and all that. So I recommend getting those and then kind of going from there. So I love the Switch 2. I think it's a really good console, and I'm excited to see how this console holds up in the next couple of years. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.